If you're a big fan of Super Tuscans, you probably know all about Bolgheri. Bolgheri is a little village in Maremma in the southwest corner of Tuscany. It's a warm area. It used to be marshland. It became famous because of a little wine called Sassicaia. It was produced just for domestic use in the 40s. And then 68 was, I think, the first vintage. In a 1978 decanter blind tasting, this relatively unknown wine. In 1972, Sassicaia beat out a lot of top-end Bordeaux. That drew a lot of interest to the region. There were other pioneers to follow, like Grattamacco. I think the first vintage was 82, and then Ornellaia, the first vintage was 1985. The Bolgheri appellation was established in 1983, and oddly enough, it was just for rosé and whites. A lot of those big name wines were labeled as Vino di Tavola or Toscana IGTs, because there was no qualification for an appellation wine until 1994. That's when Bolgheri became its own DOC. You also have Bolgheri Superiore. Those wines can be 100% Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc. They can have up to 50% of other grape varieties like Sangiovese, Syrah. I think you can also add up to 30% of Petit Verdot. In general, a lot of the wines from Bolgheri are Bordeaux blends modeled after the Bordeaux system. They usually spend about 18 months in oak, then are released pretty early. A lot of times they're released, in my opinion, too young because these wines are in demand. People will pay money for them. I do like sometimes buying Toscana IGTs because those wines are cellared a little bit longer. They're ready to drink. And Bolgheri, because the demand is high, they're passing off the aging responsibility to you. You're going to have to start out $30-50 to get a good Bolgheri Rosso, and then it can go up to hundreds of dollars like Sassicaia and Ornellaia. I still think you can find relative value, especially here. I think all the wines here are anywhere from $50 to $200. People that like Napa Cabernet Sauvignons, I think you can find more value in Maremma, especially Bolgheri. You have similar style, a little richer, a little riper. I know a lot of people hate on Bordeaux grapes in Tuscany, but I do think that they have a certain flair to them, a certain uniqueness. Some of the critics say that Bolgheri, especially the lower elevations, are too warm to produce elegant wines like they are in Bordeaux, but I find the wines in Bolgheri can be really approachable. I think the last census I saw, there's about 1,000 hectares of vineyards. I think there are around 50 producers, although that might be expanding as more and more investments going into the region. There's some serious wines, including one of the original Bolgheri's Super Tuscans in here. I'm excited to taste the difference. Big time wines, tasting out of an ultra glass. I have the Spiegelau Definition Bordeaux. This is a really inexpensive glass, $30, and it's so light. I actually did a comparison between Zalto, this, and a Gabriel Glass Gold Edition. I don't know if it's out yet by the time I release this video, but if it is, I'll pin it in the top comment. I also have a link in the description box for it. Gotta get my trusty notepad. Once again, I Coravin these and had somebody mix them up for me. I'm pretty excited to taste. Let's go with wine one. I have to use 3x5 cards to cover these tops because it is gnat season. Gnats get in the wine. Let's go. These Bolgheri wines are no shortage of color. These are all Bordeaux blends. I might have one with Sangiovese in it, but mostly Bordeaux. Okay, that typical warm Bordeaux blend flavor. Lots of cherry, red plum, maybe a little violets, mocha. The thing about these wines in Bolgheri, because they use French barriques to age 225-liter barrels, and they really know what they're doing, the wines are just, the oak integration is stellar, really stellar. Is here just a touch of mocha, have like a graveliness to it. These wines are young, current release. I think I like about Tuscan Bordeaux blends, especially Bolgheri, you can drink them right away. They're fruity. This to me is just pure balance. It's a full-bodied wine, but it's not too huge. It's just delicious. Balance, got a long finish. That's a good start. That's something that I just really enjoy drinking. Tannins on these are perfect. I was once with a very famous wine writer, Andrew Jefford, a guy we respect. We were 2 days together tasting through Croatia, and I remember we were going to a producer and there was a Bordeaux blend there, and he was like, yeah, good luck selling those wines. Sometimes those varieties, they can dry out pretty quickly. The fruit can fall off, and I had to think about that, and I was like, yeah, you're right. But in Bolgheri reds, the fruit is always there. Not too much, but it is there. Nice, let's move on to two. Shoot, one thing I forgot, I'm moving from my left to my right. Usually I move from your left to your right to make it easier to follow. I'm sorry, I had a lot going on because I also shot a behind the scenes video about how I put together these blind tastings. I'll release that a few days after this video comes out, by the way. Two. Very similar. Man, you know, Some of the complaints of like, especially Italians say like Bolgheri, these Super Tuscans are like gnocchi. They're just international wines. They all kind of taste the same. Right now, this does smell very similar to one. Cherry, cedar, just a touch of mocha. Also red plum. I think that this has a little more chocolate that sometimes can come from the wood than wine one. Oh, hold on, I gotta write this down. Number 2 is up my alley. This is gonna be a preference thing. I think a lot of people are gonna like one more because it's more round, more smooth. It's more like whole milk / heavy cream. This is more like 2% to whole milk. It's a little more elegant. There are some tannins that grip, those things that make your mouth feel a little bit more astringent. This is definitely more my style, although I think that people are going to like one a lot. I'm enjoying the mouthfeel experience on this. That's an excellent wine. Let's move on to 3. That's the thing, you can't jump to conclusions on wine at first. I was like, oh, they smell pretty similar, but then when I tasted it on the palate, it was different. Let's go to 3 here. Okay, 3 feels more dusty. It is definitely different. Red cherry, almost like a basement dust. It reminds me of my grandma, my late grandmother, great woman. I think the only family member that I've lost that just devastated me, that I cried uncontrollably. I remember when I saw her in the hospital when I drove back, or I flew back from graduate school. I remember just crying, seeing her in the hospital. Anyways, this reminds me of her basement with cherry, a little bit of mocha. This, to me, like a little bit of black olive, is a little more complex, but again, one is the most friendly so far. Man. This, again, has the layers. A lot of complexity here. It is tannic. The tannins really start to chew on your mouth. Start to bite your mouth a little bit. This is nice. Wine 2, and then especially this one, wine 3, have this rusticity to them. You'll get a ton of balsamic notes or vinaigrette notes, but it has this wonderful rusticity to it. I really like it. These are some good wines. Wine 4. Oh, at first when I was smelling 1 or 2, I was like, uh-oh, this video, you know, the wines are all going to be kind of the same, but like, now they are all different. I like, this smells like Sangiovese, actually. I like this wine. I got sour cherry, red plum, earth, a little bit of dustiness, but these are all Bordeaux blends. Actually, never mind. I have one with a little bit of Sangiovese in it, so maybe this is it. Again, I'm going to scream about this. I think most people are going to enjoy 1 the most because it's the most round, most complete. 3, especially going into 4, is more my style. Rustic. This has real bright acidity. It really reminds me of Sangiovese, although Cabernet Sauvignon has high acidity too. Have this nice acidity, this nice sting in the corners of your mouth. Tannins bite. The finish on this is incredible. That's good wine. Let's move on to wine number 5. I don't like McDonald's. I haven't eaten there since I was like 16, besides having coffee. But I love the slogan, and like the McDonald's slogan, I'm loving it so far. Wine 5 has a soy sauce component I get on Bordeaux blends, especially when they age a little bit. Although these wines are fresh. Just this touch of graphite in this wine. This wine is like got real pure flavors. Graphite, soy sauce, cherry. This reminds me of like a riper Cabernet Franc. This definitely reminds me of Cabernet Franc, the flavors. The only thing, this is the wine that shows a little bit more wood than the other previous 4 on the back end, which is not a bad thing. A lot of people love wood. Wine professionals like to poo-poo on wood, but a lot of people like wood. I don't like wood in red wines as much as I do white wines. I like barrel fermented whites. I like the oaky flavors. I like my reds to have less oak, but this is still very, very good. But it really reminds me of Cabernet Franc. Number 6. Oh, 6 has the most VA. It's got got this traditional Tuscan type flavor. Has a little bit of VA, like purple flower. It's got these dark cherry flavors, plum. So funny because I'm usually all about red fruit flavors. That's why I like Sangiovese so much, Pinot Noir, Grenache. But man, when it's black fruited, it's done right here. This smells like a traditional Tuscan wine. That's awesome wine. I don't know what I gotta compare real quick between my 2 favorites so far. By the way, I want to let you know that I've launched channel memberships, and in the top tier, the Grand Reserve tier, I've launched a special monthly hangout tasting where you can come up on screen, share your wines with me. I've also launched a live video podcast series. Members of that Grand Reserve tier can come up on screen and ask myself or the guest a question. There are also perks for the Reserve tier, the entry-level tier. It supports the work that I'm doing here, so if you are a channel member, I thank you so much. Outstanding set of wines here. I know some people say my scores are creeping up. I've actually been trying to be a little bit more critical recently, but man, these wines are all outstanding, and some are just blockbusters here. Again, I usually prefer indigenous grapes, but there's a reason that Bordeaux blends are the most replicated wines in the world, because Bordeaux blends can be so delicious. These are some absolutely killer wines here. Let's go with wine number 1 to start. I have wine number 1 and wine number 5 tied with 93 plus points, so that was the lowest scoring wine here. Shows you how excellent these are. Number 1, this is going to be the most friendly wine for a lot of people. Round, fruity, but yet complex. This is like for those that like Napa Cabernet, that like those smooth wines. I think a lot of people, when we taste all these wines together, would think, one, this is the best wine ever. And it is a great wine. I just liked some of the tannins and some of the rusticity of other wines. Let's go with wine number 1 here. 93 plus points. Let's take a look here. This is the Castello de Bolgheri, Bolgheri Superiore 2021. Historic property. This comes in at $89. This is 75% Cabernet Sauvignon, 20% Cabernet Franc, 5% Merlot. This is a crowd pleaser, $89. Look, I know it's expensive, but for those, I mean, Napa Cab these days, that's what you're entering, that price point. And I think this has sometimes a little more sensibility than some of those big, bold Napa Cabernets. Castello Bolgheri is also one of these properties. The castle's been there for a long time, but I think they recently started planting again. I can't remember. It was the 80s, 90s, or early 2000s when they started planting and producing again. Beautiful label. I know they produce a second wine that offers good value for money as well. I'm surprised how fruity and round it was with that much Cabernet Sauvignon, which can be sometimes a pretty tannic, sometimes difficult grape. Good job, Castello Bolgheri. Let's move on here to number 5, riper Cabernet Franc. That's what I felt like. This one had the most wood out of all of these in terms of what I could taste. It wasn't too much. It was maybe like some food. Like, I don't like a lot of salt in my food that might be just a tad too salty for me. That's what it reminded me of. By no means was it an oak monster, an oak bomb. I'm talking about, I just tasted it in the back end. I still gave it 93 plus points. I think it's a very good wine. A wine that I have recommended over Sassicaia before, because I've tasted it next to Sassicaia. Sometimes I thought it was just as good. This is the Argentiera Bolgheri Superiore 2020. $90 as well. 48% Merlot, 47% Cabernet Sauvignon, 7% Cabernet Franc. This is a wine that I was screaming and recommending for a long time, because just a handful of years ago, like 50, 60 bucks. Now it's up to 90. I think in Europe it's still in the $50 range. Offers ridiculous value for money, but this is how it showed in the blind taste. I mean, still very good, 93 plus points. But I remember when I did James Suckling's Great Wines of the World, this was in 2018 back in Hong Kong. They had a bunch of booths, multiple vintages of Sassicaia, Ornellaia, and Argentiera next to each other. And when I was tasting side by side, I preferred the Argentiera. So that's why I scream and shout about this wine. I thought it was 100% Cabernet Franc. Argentiera is blown up because I think they got a 100-point score or a super high score from James Suckling. So they at the events often. It's a really, really good wine. I think a lot of people are going to like it. Needs a little bit more time in the bottle. Wine number 3. Dusty basement, layers, a little more chocolate. It was rustic. It's the one that I went on and on. It reminded me of my grandmother's basement. I gave it 94 points. I thought it was an outstanding wine. And I want to thank it because it evoked memories of my late great-grandmother. 94 points. Let's take a look here. This is the Tenuta Sette Cieli Noi 4 2021 Bolgheri Rosso. This is, I don't have the breakdown percentage-wise, but I know it's Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Cabernet Franc. $49. So this is great value for money. I know their top wines I've had before, they label as just Toscana IGT, because in Bolgheri, to label it Bolgheri, I think it has to be vinified there on site. I'm impressed. I think that was a heck of a wine. I haven't visited the property yet, but I know the winemaker is a woman. Not that that matters or anything, but pretty cool, I guess. Another wine that was equally close. Wine number 2. It had similar flavors as wine one, fruity, just really remind me of a Bordeaux blend, maybe with a touch more chocolate. But remember, it smelled all big, but on the palate, it started to get a little bit leaner. I really like the elegance, the length on it. I gave it 94 plus points. I thought it was an outstanding wine. 94 plus points. Let's take a look here. We have the Ornellaia Bolgheri Superiore. It comes in at 69 bucks. 95% Merlot, 5% Cabernet Sauvignon, 69 bucks. Another great value for money. This is owned by Tenuta San Felice, which makes great affordable Chianti Classico, which means this wine will be distributed. I liked it because of the right flavors up front, yet it was leaner on the back end. 14.5 alcohol, but does not feel that massive. These last two, excellent value for money. Excellent value for money. The top two wines here. Let's go with wine number 4. I thought it was Sangiovese-esque. That's why I just loved it. It had that sour cherry, those earthy tones, had a little more tannin. That's why I liked it. 95 points. I thought it was excellent wine. 95 points. One of the classics, the only wine that has a little Sangiovese in it. This is the Grattamacco 2020 Bolgheri Superiore, 120 bucks, so it's pretty expensive. 65% Cabernet Sauvignon, 20% Merlot, 15% Sangiovese, 18 months in oak. Again, this was one of the original Super Tuscans. I love it. I love it. I love it. I want to drink it. This is an iconic wine. There's not much more to say about that. Was outstanding. The top wine, I went back and forth to taste between these two. I gave it a whopping 96 points. A little bit rustic, not as international, had acidity, kind of similar to the Grattamacco style, but when I tasted side by side, it just had a little bit of oomph that made me like it all the more. This is the Aola de Orma, Bolgheri Superiore 2021. This is 100% Cabernet Franc. This comes in, it's not cheap. This comes in Italy, it's like 210 bucks. If it is distributed in the States, by the time it gets here, I'm guessing it'd be 250. Yeah, it's like Sassicaia range. But that is just an outstanding wine. That's the top wine from Orma. And a wine that I love because the Orma, I think 69, 70 bucks. I think it's great value for money. It's not often that the most expensive wine wins in these blind tasting videos, but in this case, it happened. That's a heck of a wine. So tell me, do you like Super Tuscans? You prefer Sassicaia or Ornellaia? Have you tasted any of these? Maybe now you have some of these on your shopping list. I'd love to know. Drop it in the comments below.